Welcome to the Romance Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Martin and Morgan Brice, and we're talking about food-themed romance. I mean, love and food and love and food, they go together. And so we're going to talk about that. And if there's a holiday twist with the food or the love, even better. But before we start into that, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Irene.
Hi, I am Irene. I write contemporary foodies and paranormals with Liv Rancourt. That's me.
Okay, BL.
Hi, I'm BL Maxwell. I write contemporary and paranormal, mostly romance. I write a few other genres, but those are kind of my main ones. And most of my books actually do have food in them. After I thought about that, most do include food.
Piper.
Hi, I'm Piper Huguley, and I write historical romance and historical fiction, and I have one contemporary romance that is centered around food.
Nice. Kay.
Hi, I'm Kay Evan Coles, and I write mostly contemporary romance, but also paranormal. And I've talked about this with several of you on several occasions. I write about food a lot, and I don't really mean to, but it just happens and I go with it. It's fine.
We understand. We totally do. Melonie.
Hi, I'm Melonie Johnson. I write contemporary romance, romantic comedies, and seasoned romance. Yeah, one of my seasoned romances was just revolved around babka and some other.
And I'm Gail Martin and Morgan Brice. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy, but as Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. And since I like food, my characters like food. And I think, food is a part of life, and it can tell you so much about where something takes place and who the characters are. And I have an editor that if I ever don't describe the food, I get red marks back going, what did they eat? What did they drink? How was it cooked? So I just put it in now for the start. Cuts down on editorial marks, which brings me to the first question. And that is, how do you use food in your books? Is it part of the romance? Is it part of the seduction? Is it just, hey, we've all got to eat to live? How do you do it, BL?
Well, the last book that I put it in that food was actually a pretty big part of was Green-Eyed Boy. And one main character is on a cross-country road trip. You don't know why at the beginning, but he basically is on a food tour. So he's going to each state and going to different food festivals and trying to hit whatever is popular in that area and try it all. So he has it in his mind, he wants to try a lobster roll in Maine. So when he gets to this food festival, he spots a truck with a big lobster on top. So he's like, oh, this is perfect. And then he meets the other MC, Lance Carl, who he wants to own a restaurant eventually, but his specialty is he has a food truck that serves lobster rolls. That's his big thing. So, but it's kind of funny because this book, it kind of expanded into a lot of how they make the lobster rolls and how, and I don't really know why it went that way. It probably has a little too much detail on the food, but I kind of felt like it was almost a character in the book in a way, because it's how they meet and it's what brings them together. And you find out later on that it's a big commonality between the two of them and their upbringings. So it's almost another character in the book.
Okay. Melonie.
So yes, I mentioned babka. So my most recent release that just came out last week is part of the anthology Christmas Wishes and New Year's Kisses. My story is Always Be My Babka, and it is part of my MILFs Just Want to Have Fun series, which features women in their 40s and up. So she is a widowed bakery owner, and she is going to bring a babka to this. It's like a cakewalk. Have you ever heard of a cakewalk before?
Mm-hmm.
So I actually dove into the rules and regulations of cakewalks. There are quite a variety of ways to have your cakewalks. I knew the kind I remembered from when I was younger. So it was interesting. That part was interesting. But anyways, there's a hot cardiologist who really wants to get his hands on her babka and possibly things.
Wow, cakewalks. Did those at family reunions when I was a kid growing up. And there was one lady who always seemed to win her own cake. I don't know how that worked, but she always seemed to win. Irene.
Okay, so I migrated to the guest room, presumably where the best internet is, but as usual, the internet hates Zoom meetings. So what was the question?
It was, tell us about some of the food that you've used in your book.
Oh, okay. Well, I think my I tend to go either way. Probably my best known foodie is my main characters run a very high end restaurant in New York City. But the
I think you froze, Irene. Kay, let's pick up with you. And if Irene comes back, we'll pick it up there.
Okay, I also had to migrate, so that's why I shut my camera off. Sorry. So using food in books, sometimes I have found that I have a tendency to cast main characters as who work with food. So like I have a baker, I have a couple of people who are chefs in restaurants. So the food definitely becomes one of those things where the characters can connect with each other. I'm not sure that I'm thinking about now, and I haven't actually, cast anyone who uses food as part of the romance, even though I feel like food and feeding people and enjoying food together can be seductive and all that stuff. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it definitely has become something that I'm conscious of it, because sometimes I'll start writing something and I'm like, I'll just make him a chef. And I'm like, I can't do that. I have several chefs already. He needs to have a different profession. So that's kind of how I've weaved food into my stories, if that makes sense.
Sure, it does. Well, she was here, now she's gone. Piper.
Maybe she'll come back.
Well, if she does, we'll get to her then.
Well, this talk will definitely expand my TBR and my waistline. I have always been fascinated by food, and one of the things I noticed is I've been teaching in college for quite a many decades now, is this growing population of my students at a particular time. I don't think it's the case as much now as it was maybe 10 years ago, where people seem to be proud of the fact that they couldn't cook. That there was a whole aspect of not having that knowledge about recipes and what recipes were as being not important. And so I developed the idea of sweet tea, which is my contemporary romance centered around this granddaughter who was one of these people who had forgotten the importance of her grandmother's recipes. And recipes are intellectual property. So I made her be an intellectual property lawyer. And the romance comes about when a documentarian comes to interview and film her grandmother because he values her recipes and knowledge, but she also recognizes, hey, somebody could be making money off my grandmother's intellectual property, and that's not cool. So that's where the romance part comes in, but it has a lot to do with the heroine's discovery of just what recipes are in terms of a woman's storehouse of family secrets and knowledge and all of that other kind of stuff. So that's what it's about.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I've used food in a number of places in my books. In Trash and Treasure, one of my shifters, he's a possum shifter. So he's a baker who works all night. And his specialty is really unique donuts, especially things that have like that mimic cocktails. So he's always doing things like pina colada and mimosa donuts and all kinds of things. And that's how he woos the raccoon shifter, who is the night garbage man. and he always stops to empty the dumpster behind the bakery. And Jack brings him out the latest donuts too. Hey, what do you think, Nico? Do you think these are any good? This is my new recipe. And, you know, way to a man's heart is right through the donuts.
I don't know how you finished writing that book without eating like 9,000 donuts, because that's what I would be doing.
You did not realize it, Crispy Critters here. So, yes, it was dangerous. I love using food as an indicator of where a book is taking place. So Badlands, that series takes place in Myrtle Beach in South Carolina Low Country. So you're going to have a lot of seafood. You're going to have a lot of the spices and calabash type food that's very common there, and that is kind of part of the regional identity. And one of the characters in the Badlands series is from Pittsburgh, and he's part of a big Italian family. So you've got all kinds of, you know, the table isn't done being filled until it's almost going to break in the middle with food and all kinds of good stuff. And I've had readers email me going, I've never heard of this. What is it? Well, that's because it's from Northwestern Pennsylvania. And if you're from there, you know, and if not, here's the little explanation. So, and to me, that brings a lot of color. I love that when I find that when I'm a reader and I've got to go look something up because I've never heard of it. Thanks to Korean paranormal dramas, I now have a whole new appreciation for Korean food, which is an awesome thing. So what about holiday food in your romances? Do your people fall in love over food or shared donuts or other kinds of treats? Melonie?
Yeah, so actually the book that I've got coming out in February, Too Wrong to Be Right, there they are. This is a very much friends to lovers situation, and Kat is Polish and she bakes kolaczkis with her babcia, with her grandma, and she loves kolaczkis, and I myself love kolaczkis. It's no hardship to talk to. So there is a scene where he ends up coming over with his grandmother to bake kolaczkis with the heroine and her grandmother. And there's definitely if Kat's willing to share the heroine is willing to share her kolaczkis, she clearly likes you because she will hoard those for herself. And yeah, so that's a fun. I definitely incorporate food as much as possible as like a way of connecting. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I do. I'm thinking about the two Christmassy holiday-ish. They're not always Christmassy because I just feel like there's so many winter holidays that you can kind of celebrate. So there is definitely food in
food, so we can borrow the food too.
Yeah, I know, right? So in one of them, there was a chef. He owns a food truck with some friends, and so a lot of the food, I really like Italian food. I like all the noodles in the world, but I really love it, like Italian pasta. So I did a lot of research on Italian pasta and how to cook it in a food truck. And I wrote a lot of recipes about, I didn't write the recipes. I wrote scenes where there was a lot of food with like rich pastas, because the other main character has a lot of insecurity about his weight. And I wanted it to be kind of like him learning to relax about not only food, but also just like this person who wants to feed him, not because he wants to make him one weight or the other, but because that's how he expresses care for this person. So there was definitely a lot of food in that holiday. It's a novella called Healing Hearts. And there was definitely a lot of food, and it tends to be sort of pasta based, if you like that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Piper.
Well, here's where I hadn't realized how much I was writing about food, because in my historical fiction by her own design, which is about Anne Lowe, the Black woman who designed Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress, it was pointed out to me by a group that I was talking to about the book, about how much of a role she plays in the book. And I didn't even realize that these people put it. It's like, that was a really good analysis. But part of the reason it did was because it's believed that Anne Lowe, due to her her childhood in Jim Crow, Alabama was malnourished. So one of the ways in which and she was a child bride too, at the age of 12, actually. And one of the ways in which her pedophile jerk husband woos her is by buying her food that she would not have had access to otherwise. There's a whole scene in the book where they go to the grocer, and there's this whole thing in terms of reifying that it is indeed Jim Crow, Alabama, in terms of the grocer making the decision about what they're permitted to buy by way of what are people permitted to eat. They're not permitted to eat the so-called high off the hog, which is, the best parts, where that saying comes from, or in this particular case, a chicken, but chicken livers, not chicken itself. And so he buys the chicken for her, something that she rarely has access to, and grooms her with it.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah. I did a Christmas story in the Witchbane series where Seth and Evan are still kind of getting to know each other. It's their first Christmas together, and they're making some snacks to have a movie night. And Evan wants to make his grandmother's Chex Mix recipe. And Seth doesn't realize the importance of that and says, well, it's so much easier to just buy it by the bag. And then he doesn't realize why Evan's hurt. And it's because Evan has very little left of his family and his memories. But the Chex Mix his grandmother made and the recipe he used to make with her is one of the good memories he has left. And so they have a conversation about that. And of course, they go make the Chex Mix the right way, which of course is one of my very favorite things. And I have one of those recipes like that. But just, tying up how food is so much more than food, because it's memory, and it's tied in with class and privilege and location and so many things, that food isn't ever just food.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have that many holiday. I have a few holiday books. I was trying to think of what food they have. Excuse me. The one, Remember When, is Friends to Lovers, where these guys have known each other. They grew up together. And so the one guy usually spends Christmas Eve with the other guy's family. So they've done this always. And on Christmas Eve, they just have snack food. They just have all kinds of snacks. And one of the snacks they have is like green onion dip, the like Lay's chips, and that green onion dip that's a packet that you mix with that in the 70s, I think, was a big thing. And so I had them do that. And that, to me, when I was a kid, that was a big, it was a special thing to have, because you only had that on holidays.
It was like a fancy thing to have, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Super fancy. You're like, yes.
Yes, you got to open the packet, it was special. So I totally get what you're saying. It's funny how you really do equate these things. It doesn't matter what it is. It's a simple food, but to you, that's Christmas, or that's, whatever special thing it is.
Which leads perfectly into the next question, which is, what were the foods that you grew up with at the holidays? Piper?
Well, it's interesting. The several aspects of things have come up that remind me of what I grew up with. Having grown up in Pittsburgh, there's very interesting aspect of all of those cultures that were a part of my childhood, that meant that I ate way beyond the, Southern descended kind of United States food. That the very big Italian and Eastern European influences in that city colored my childhood, in terms of things. So Christmas, we would have things like nut horns, for instance, which is a particular cookie that I know has a Eastern European origin. I was posting today on Facebook because for election day, we would always have stuffed cabbages, which was another kind of Eastern European dish, in terms of some of those kinds of influences that really, I think, came out of Pittsburgh can be this very segmented city in terms of the neighborhoods being individualized to one another. But then there was also a certain kind of mixing of the cultures, I think, that came from people working together in the workplace. That meant that people got to sample one another's cultures in terms of food. So there's this, what some people might think of as a surprising sort of texture of Italian and Eastern European foods that I've been exposed to while I was growing up. Pretty cool.
We lived there for 10 years, and I can attest that Pittsburgh is a town that moves on its stomach.
Yeah.
And I can totally
Definitely.
see guys bringing their lunch pails to the steel mill and
Mhm,
going, "Hey, that smells good. Can I have a
mhm,
taste?" Or my mom, my wife made a ton of cookies. Here, have some. And
mhm.
I can totally see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Holiday food. So my mom is Filipino and my father is an Irishman, an American Irishman. So for me, the holidays were always about two dinners. I mean, I think a lot of people go through this, but like the dinners were very different because one was like my grandmother, my Irish grandmother's food was, like a roast beef and potatoes, all that great stuff, the sweet potatoes with the marshmallows on top, that kind of thing, all delicious. And then the meal my mother would make would have a lot of Filipino influence in it. So like egg rolls and particular kinds of fried noodles, also all delicious. So we ate a lot. And sometimes there was crossover between the two families, but not always, because my Irish grandmother was like, I don't need your food in my house, which is unfortunate, but whatever, that's what it was. And then when I got married, my husband's family was Italian. So then I had a third dinner to go to. And it was like a very delicious, lots of the traditional stuff, but also these like very homemade, we were talking about recipes earlier, very homemade things that were very personal to the family. Like this woman, his grandmother and her two sisters would get together and make dumplings for soup. And they would make like hundreds of dumplings, like make it into a contest. And if there wasn't any dumpling soup at the meal, it was literally like the world had ended. One time there was no, like one of the sisters decided that she didn't want to make the soup. And there was literally an outcry in the family. We have to have this or it won't be Christmas. And I didn't think it was silly for them to be upset about it at all. Although I did sort of sympathize with the sister who was planning the dinner and didn't want to have the dumplings, but I was just like, just going to see what happens. And if there's dumplings, I'll eat them. That'll be great.
When I was a kid, my aunt, if she would have the whole family over for something special, like at the holiday, we would get homemade Chex Mix and ginger ale. And to me, that was fancy party food. That was really, putting on the Ritz there. And I still got to admit, where that ginger ale, get that bowl of Chex Mix, and I'm living large.
Well, I think, people use the word comfort food sort of flippantly, but it really is a thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard for people to kind of understand why you want to have Chex Mix and ginger ale, but you're like, just leave me my thing. I'm going to eat this. It's delicious. You can have some if you like, and if not, go away.
Yeah, but I know what you mean about the different cultures mixing. My piano teacher was Italian, and she would make homemade pizzelles for our recitals. And so, there'd be a table full of pizzelles. And that was something I'd never experienced before that. And it was, wonderful to explore. So, yeah, that was definitely part of what I grew up with. My dad always worked on Christmas, so my mom and I went to the one restaurant that was open on Christmas because it was just the two of us. So we didn't cook a whole lot until I married into this large extended family that did this huge family potluck for every holiday. And it was like, yes, this is wonderful. And then there were all the Jello salads and the casseroles and it was fantastic. So I got my husband and a huge extended family that cooked. It was a pretty good deal. Yeah.
So I grew up, I'm from California, but I'm from really small town in California, like 595 population. And we, every holiday, well, we normally as a family just got together for Christmas and Thanksgiving, but every holiday from as long as I could remember till probably I was in high school, we had the exact same food. We had, I mean, everything: turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, gravy, ham, potato salad. I don't know why we had potato salad. No one knows, but it became a really big deal if it wasn't there. And then they'd be really picky about who made it. And then we had, you talk about Jello salads. So we had different relatives that made different, you know, Aunt Betty made ambrosia. My other aunt made like an orange Jello salad. But the favorite was this, it sounds disgusting, but it's that green Jello salad that has pineapple and cottage cheese and walnuts.
I've
My
had that.
husband, my husband can't even look at it. He just thinks it's the most disgusting. And my sister and I are like, oh, we're gonna have green Jello salad. You know? We're just so excited over this, and it's just so nasty. Both of us don't want to make it, but we really want to eat it. So it's funny how you just come to expect this. And then like I remember the first time someone threw a different food in, my cousin, I can't remember if it was my cousin or someone brought spinach salad in remember when that was big in a bread bowl, and everybody mowed into it. So we were like, wow, maybe we should kind of change it up sometimes and not have the same exact meal. But it's, you know, it's kind of changed now where we don't have turkey anymore. And I think it's because we had the same exact meal for so long, and where, yeah, it's tradition and you like to see it, but my God, it after, you know, 400 of those meals, you're kind of over it.
Mm-hmm. Melonie.
So I grew up in a mixed faith household. My mother's side of the family is Jewish. So one of the things I always grew up remembering what was special was my nanny would make what she called Mandelbreit. And so I actually was looking for it because I wanted to write a story based on this. And I was trying to find Mandelbreit. It's actually called Mandelbrot or Mandelbread. But, you know, my nanny always called it Mandelbreit. So trying to Google Mandelbreit, finally I found it. But it took me a while, but I found her handwritten recipe card. And so that's the inspiration for a book that will be coming. But basically it is a Jewish biscotti. It is like a twice baked cookie. And we usually will also add a layer of like fruit filling into it. So, and then my grandmother always would like add food coloring to it. So it'd be reds and greens and blues and purples and these really colorful cookies. So that was only during the winter, during the December holidays around Hanukkah, would she make that. So I started doing that with my daughters, where I taught them how to. It's quite a process, you know, rolling out that dough and all that. So it's become definitely a tradition to dig out the index card with Nani's handwriting and interpreting what she's writing and what a glass means, because she used the word like glass. And again, in Jewish cooking, you often use oil instead of butter to keep it kosher. So, you know, figuring all the interpretation of all that out, but it just makes it extra special because it is, you know, a part of my heritage and a part of you know, my family's background. Yeah, but we were the house with the giant Star of David and then all the other Christmas lights as well.
So what do you make for holidays now? And what's your treasured family recipe dish? Okay.
I have to think about the treasured family recipe dish, but I will say that I don't know why I picked up this habit of making a Boxing Day pie, but not necessarily for Boxing Day, even though there's usually a little bit left over. So I usually make it for Christmas Eve, and it's basically a bacon. It's terribly unhealthy, a bacon and onion pie, and it's so good. So I make that, and then I guess if I was going to pick a treasured family recipe, I don't make them, but my mother makes these really delicious fried egg rolls. They're different sizes. And I don't know if you've ever had Filipino cooking, but it's super duper personal to almost to like the family level. So if you grow up eating food that, you know, your family makes, it will taste very different from anyone else's, which is fine because it's all good. But that, like the specific, they're called lumpia. The specific egg rolls that my mom makes, the lumpia that she makes, are probably, anyone who eats them is essentially hooked for life. And except if you're a vegetarian, because she doesn't believe in making vegetarian food. So that would be something that always means sort of holiday party, and not necessarily fancy, but certainly delicious foods.
We usually do a turkey with all the trimmings for Thanksgiving, and a ham with different trimmings for Christmas, except for the turkey breast we have to have because I've got a daughter who doesn't like ham. I think treasured family recipes, I've got a cranberry jello salad that my mom made. Now I'm sure it came off a Dream Whip box somewhere. It wasn't some culinary masterpiece, but she cooked so little that was really special. We've also got my mother-in-law's turkey stuffing, and I love it. I'll eat it cold out of the fridge. The only problem is the recipe is for a 22-pound turkey. So anything less than that requires math, because that's a whole lot of stuffing for a 22-pound turkey. And I think the other thing has been a peppermint cake out of Southern Living that my husband tried one year, and it was a big hit with the kids and then with their significant others. And so it just came and stuck around. So those are the ones that we do, and the treasured family recipe with that jello salad and stuffing. BL?
We, like I said, we've kind of gotten away from turkey, and we don't get together with my family as much as we did. And so I kind of like it because it's much more casual, like way more casual. And so the past few years, like one year I did a turkey breast for Thanksgiving, but did a turkey roll. So you roll it out and put the stuffing and everything inside it, and then braid bacon on top. So that was really good. Last year I thought I'd be special and do a spatchcock. It was it's kind of horrifying to have to do that. You know what I mean? You have to do a lot of cutting on the turkey. My husband walked in the kitchen and was like scarred for life and couldn't he just didn't want to see that. I would say the family dish that, again, it's the potato salad, because I can do the potato salad like my grandmother did the potato salad, and no one, everybody, all of our family does it a little bit different, but they're so vocal if you didn't put enough mayonnaise, you put too much mayonnaise, you use sweet pickles, not dill, or you use dill, not sweet, or there's a million different ways, but we all have our little special way.
Melonie?
So the kolaches I mentioned that are coming up in the book that's coming out, those are have become kind of like a trademark thing that I have to make every holiday. People expect them as gifts at this point. They want their box of kolaches. There was one year that I was just like, things were just too busy and I couldn't get around to it. So I bought kolaches like from the Sam's Club bakery or Costco bakery or something, and put them on a tray to bring to my Polish mother-in-law's house, my Polish stepmother-in-law's house, and she was like, these are not your kolaches. Like, these are like, she didn't have a filter, and she let me know these were not so the kolaches are definitely something that I do, and like, again, I've become like an expected gift. And then also my husband loves peanut butter blossoms, those peanut butter cookies with the Hershey Kiss. So that is a must. Like, that's like the one cookie, like no matter how busy the holidays are, that is the one cookie I'll make sure gets baked. And then he'll just eat them from like Christmas to New Year's. Just eat those cookies.
Okay. Piper?
Well, the dressing recipe that my mother always did came to me, and I'm the one who knows how to make it. So I make it, and I freeze half. So it freezes very well for some other point in the year in terms of that. So I just make the whole thing, and and freeze the other half. My husband came into my family. The one thing he can do is make sweet potato pie. That's it. He cannot scramble an egg, but he can make that sweet potato pie. And when he makes it like man size. There are 4 of them. So we make them, and we, some people have received the other ones as gifts, whatever, while we eat on the one, in terms of that. And one tradition that has faded, thankfully, because now we're all smaller since my parents have died and everything else. So we're smaller families and everything. But one tradition that we used to have growing up that I said has faded is chitlins. And I'm glad of that, because I was the one amongst our family, which are animal intestines, that and I have written about them in a story before, or as well. It's just not published, but they were a Christmas gift, my grandmother's Christmas gift to my father, his mother's, because my mother refused to make them because it is quite a process to have to clean them and prepare them for cooking. And as much as my mother loved my father, she wouldn't do it. But his mother, this was the thing that she could do for her baby boy, right? And so she would bring, it got, my mother would say that, the Cool Whip bowl got smaller and smaller. Because you can have a 10-pound bucket, but by the time it cooks down, it gets into this small bowl. And the bowl would get smaller, and then people, amongst the 4 of us, want some. My mother would share with my father, and then my sister learned to like them as well. And my father got kind of irritated. It's Christmas, but like every Christmas night, that was the thing. Oh, it's time to break out the chitlins. I would run downstairs to the basement and just be like, I'll wait until you all are done, because I am not eating that. So.
Well, folks, we have blown through our time as usual. So before we go, let's go around, let everybody know if you have a new, recent, upcoming, or holiday release, food optional, but of course encouraged, and let us know where we can find you online. Starting with you, BL.
I do have a new, or I just had a release actually, Blinding Light. It's a rock star romance. And I don't, oh no, they do go and have coffee. I was gonna say, I think it's like the only book that doesn't have food in it. But yeah, it's, they're on tour. They do eat, but it's not a main part. You can find me at blmaxwellwriter.com, and I'm always on Facebook. That's really the best place to find me or message me.
Okay, Melonie.
So Christmas Wishes, New Year's Kisses, the anthology just came out, and you can find, I actually messed up because Always Be My Babka was in, there's so many releases, it's weird. I had 11 anthologies this year. So the story in that anthology is actually Who Are You Doing New Year's Eve? So different story altogether. But then, yeah, and then Too Wrong to Be Right, which will be out February 28th. And actually, one of the pre-order gifts is going to be my Kalachki recipe. I am going to include it as like a pre-order gift, on like a cute little postcard or whatever. So you can find me at meloniejohnson.com with the O, at Melonie Johnson, pretty much everywhere on all the socials, or The Writing Lush.
Okay, Piper.
My food book, my food category romance, Sweet Tea, is still available, even if Hallmark Publishing is now defunct. But it's still available at all retailers, as well as my historical fiction by Her Own Design. And you can find me at piperhuguley.com, Piper_Huguley at Instagram, and Piper G. Huguley on Facebook. And if you're still on Twitter, at Piper Huguley.
Okay, Kay.
That was funny. Sorry, I have a release coming out on the 15th of this month, so that's exciting. Takes me a long time to write books, so every time I get one out there, I'm like, yes, I did it. It's called Hopeful Hearts, and it is a friends to lovers second act kind of a thing. So this person who's basically remaking his life. There is food in it, but it's not a driving sort of plot point. They just eat and feed each other because because I would do that to myself, I guess. You can find me at kevincoles.com and on all the socials, generally searching for kevincoles.com. Kevin Coles will pull up me.
Okay. And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbrice.com. I'm on all the social media, but look for, if you can spell the names, you'll find me because it's all some variation of those. My newest release as a romance is Sins of the Fathers in the Kings of the Mountain series, and that's set in Western North Carolina. So there's all kinds of goodies from there. And most of the time, however, you can find me here on Continual. So thank you so much to all of you for spending your evening with us. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more romance and more holidays here on Continual. So we'll see you online.